My name is Reverend Juniper Meadows. I'm a tall, curly-haired woman in colorful attire behind the pulpit, and it's my pleasure to serve as your minister here at Second Unitarian Church of Omaha. Tom's comment about perception is highly relevant today as we are considering the raw stuff of perception, not just sight, of course, but also sound and taste and kinds of perceptions we may not experience except through the vehicle of our imagination, chemical signature, pheromone, more than human perceptions that elude us, but which we may invoke the magic of human imagination in order to develop some empathy for, expand our circles of compassion. And in Unitarian Universalism, we begin worship with a chalice lighting, the symbol of a free faith, the fire of commitment, the warmth of community. Bring your heart to this symbol. Let it speak to you. What does the light mean to you? And join me in a spirit of reverence, spirit of life and love, and all things that grow towards wholeness and new life, renewal. We gather this morning on the precipice of a new day, a new life, always in the making and the remaking, these stories that we are being told even as we tell them. May we expand our senses, our hearts, and our understanding to spread as wide as we can that circle of compassion. Give us senses to see, to notice, to feel, to touch, those bonds that bind each of us to all things, that we may, in those words of Mary Oliver, know our place in the family of things. Amen. Blessed be. My point, exactly, to believe, then, in justice, mercy, beauty, goodness, kindness, hope. Hope. If it's a fantasy, if it's a dream, an imagination, might it still be something that captures our perception, that holds us to something higher than ourselves, that reminds us that we are not on the road alone. We do not care in isolation. And again, as Jane noted, we may not be able to do as much with our own only two hands, but more is possible when our heads, hearts, and hands pull together. Related, friends, how often do you think about your breathing? Unless you practice mindfulness meditation, I'm going to wager not too terribly often. Speaking of which, highly recommend Forest Snap's meditation group here on Wednesdays at 6:30. It's fantastic. I went to the first one this Wednesday. I had a wonderful time. But most of the time, we're not thinking about our breathing, much less where it came from, y'all, right? Where did breath and air come from? It's a story, but a real one. I believe the imagination can serve as our guide, and we peer way, way, way back in time when the earth was very, very young and life was just beginning to turn, and there were these anaerobic bacteria, possibly deep in the ocean, things that didn't breathe, anaerobic. And after a long enough time of these critters just milling about, one of them learned the infinite food glitch, started playing with cheat codes. The ancestors to plants, mosses, algae, these friends learned how to turn sunlight and carbon dioxide and water into sugar and into food. And in the process, liberating oxygen. Most oxygen at the time on the planet was bound up in carbon or in hydrogen, so making water or making carbon dioxide, but there wasn't as much that was free in the atmosphere, what we creatures use to breathe. Also, the same substance that rusts your car. Right. In fact, most other organisms couldn't survive in a world like this. This newly oxygenated world poisoned most things and opened up a lot of ecological niches. Now, I don't know how far your empathy extends, if it extends to single-celled organisms. That sounds hard, but no judgment. But this was the greatest loss of life first major loss of life we're aware of, but it carved out a world where creatures such as I could exist, for not everything was lost to the oxygenation event. Some creatures, like our ancestors, old ancestors, y'all, learned to use oxygen for their respiration, learned to make it part of who they are and to give in return. And so in these ruins, in the evolution to use oxygen, we have the emergence of reciprocity. Breath is a participation in this old planetary legacy, older than just about anything else, older than the rings of Saturn, older still. You take a deep breath with me, friends. Feel it. And it is not just that you are sharing in the breath of Caesar or a dinosaur. You are participating in the Commonwealth of breath, which is an idea I'm borrowing from that ecological philosopher David Abrahms, the Commonwealth of breath, this thing that binds all of us, all things that live, that grow, that swim or that fly, barring a few anaerobic bacteria that still kick around. But most things do this. They breathe. Because an atmosphere has been created, friends, by this interweaving of our ancestors and also the ancestors of fungi, right? Because we are more closely related to fungi than plants, but that's a different sermon. This relationship between these branches on the tree of life, creating the atmosphere. The etymology of atmosphere is interesting. You know, sphere, round, but atmos, spirit. We don't think about our breathing very much. We don't perceive it in a way, except maybe when we feel it blowing or hear it in the trees. Those of us who are side-oriented won't really notice it too much because it's see-through, it's invisible. Thank goodness for that, unless it's foggy. But we, nonetheless, are in relationship with this spirit. Before we knew what oxygen was, before we knew, Joseph Priestley also, phlogiston, Unitarian. Put that in your pocket. They chased him out of England with torches and pitchforks. Where was I? Oxygenation has there's this reciprocal quality between plants and animals. We are part of this participatory reciprocity that is older than time. Lord have mercy, y'all. Where was I? This happens sometimes, y'all. It's not just that you are part of the Commonwealth of breath. That idea isn't going to pay your bills, right? It's not going to put a roof over your head, food in your mouth. But it is a part of you, toe to tip, inside and out. Such a perspective might evoke the imagination to consider one's relationship with the more than human world, with the squirrel in the tree, the bird on the fence, the tree in your yard, every blade of grass, everything that lives inside of you, all of the non-human cells that make up your gut microbiome, that keep you alive and well, all of this made possible. And the ruins of what was, and the waking up of what can be, and the emergence of reciprocity and relationship to make a new world like this blue boat home we live on today. In our exploration of perception, what is language? Oxford defines it as the principal method of human communication consisting of words used in a structured and conventional way and conveyed by speech, writing, or gesture. Communication, structured, conventional, human. I am only one of these. Just joking. I'd like to suggest something a little unconventional. I've suggested it before, but such ideas demand reiterating. This definition is incomplete. Language supersedes the human condition, touches more than the hard limit of our species, right? When we speak, what are we doing? We are manipulating organs to give the air this commonwealth of breath, this character of vibration that is received by an ear or a device of some kind, meant to evoke a connection between one individual and another. This is what we mean by human communication, often with speaking or writing, or any of the other ways that humans communicate, signs. But we also communicate in things like dress, in smell, perhaps even in really imperceptible ways like body language that we may not be entirely conscious of all the time. We are a communication machine, y'all. And while language entails a degree of structure and convention, this is true, there is structure and convention in these other ways that the human animal communicates, and in the ways that more than human beings communicate as well. It seems a little short-sighted to stop at language being applicable only to humans. This is my perspective, at least. Language is part of the world crawling into existence, flashing scales and feathers, emitting chemical signatures, seeing, touching, tasting, yes, but there are a host of what we might consider senses that have a convention, that have a structure, that are bound up in species and in particulars of species, and yet they are not often considered language, not in this way, because they are more than human. Now, we do have to expand our imagination a bit to imagine a world where we know the world via chemical signature or scent to a degree that we don't have access to, like how a dog knows the world. How a dog knows the world must be absolutely wild. Can you imagine what it would be like to be your dog and just going for a walk? The whole world has this character to it that is absolutely unknown to you until you expand your imagination, which when you do, and your dog is annoying you because they're sniffing for way too long, you might expand some empathy and remember just how interesting this hyper-technicolor, technic-smeller world truly is. I don't know if there is another world or an afterlife. I remain open to the possibility, but I just don't know. But I do know that there is another world, and it is this one, the one right beneath your nose, if only it were a little longer. And it's not even limited to animals, friends. In our yard over here, there is a red oak tree. And last November, some friends in the religious naturalist group and I planted a young red oak tree. Now, it's going to take a long time, as things often do. But one day, if it gets enough water and light and nutrition, then that red oak tree is going to grow and hopefully not cause any trouble for anybody. But if it grows enough, and the mycelium, the fungal body that connects plants together and shares, that they use to share information and nutrition, they might talk to one another. And this larger red oak tree may help the smaller red oak tree thrive. It's possible. It's not guaranteed. But this is how forests do. This is how they communicate with one another over vast distances, sharing, helping, receiving. Right. Language isn't just for us. And when it is for us, language is so primal and hard-coded. Babies are learning language so fast. When they're right into this world and brand new and they don't know what these symbols and these signs and these sounds mean, they still are learning accents and dialects and facial structure and how to be a human being in this world. Only though, of course, if they're in relationship to other humans. We are extremely fragile as a species. We cannot fend for ourselves as children. This is kind of why it's a miracle we're here in the first place. But for that to be true, there must be something about the human condition, something to that idea of Terry Pratchett's, where we become the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape, where we have let ourselves believe in something bigger than ourselves, like there is such a thing as hope, or love, or just tomorrow, just this world being more than it is so often painted to be, a thing to consume and to destroy, and for what? For what? Now, this idea, as I mentioned before, isn't going to put food in your belly. It's not going to give you a heaven afterwards. I think it might open our hearts up to the possibility of a heaven that's right here and made of the stuff of this world. When we can learn to hear and to feel and to taste that language of animacy, the livingness of the land. And when I say animacy, I'm not trying to invoke hard supernaturalisms about animism, but you don't have to, because the world is obviously teeming with perception, teeming with a more than human agency that we lack direct access to, yet we have this gift of empathy and imagination. We might extend that just a little further than we normally do, and feel what it feels like. It's imperfect. It's not scientific, not by a long shot. It doesn't have to be. Because this disconnect between our head and our heart, between what we feel, what lies in our intuition and lies in our imagination, need not be in conflict with what we know. They must be partners. They must be partners. For this to not be so, it is only ruination. Reason alone cannot save us. It's impossible. The same hard reason that might be able to navigate how to restore an ecological system, a wetland or such, is the same kind of human reason that learned how to split the atom, that designed every weapon that every first world military superpower has in its arsenal. Reason alone is cold. It's useful. It's extremely human. It's a kind of everyday magic, y'all. Just like language is. Just like your imagination is. One time someone here asked me if I was magic, and I realized something, that this dangerous stuff about being a clergy person, this is where like Joel Osteen's and Kenneth Copeland's come from. But I am, but only in the way that everything else is, and only in the way that you are, and all things. For there is something like magic about us, y'all. I've lost my quarter. I was going to do you a magic trick to wrap things up, but it's okay. If you find a quarter, it's yours. Oh. I made it disappear, but when I was a Montessori teacher, I used to do this trick with the kids where I would hold a coin in my hand and I would put my hands together, and I'll spoil the magic for you. There are so many magic tricks, and I would hide it between my fingers. And it would look like it was gone. It wasn't. Trick of perception. But it still evoked a feeling in them. Just like going to a magic show where people are actually good at magic might evoke a feeling in you of wonderment and surprise. I would go to magic shows, participate in arts and culture, but walk outside and look at the character of tree bark, really hear birdsong, consider all that is unseen and untouched and unknown around you, within you. Wake your senses to bask in that oneness of everything, that bigger picture, that language of animism that teems and speaks and screams and craws and claws all around us, all of the time. May we have eyes to see, ears to hear, hearts to feel, hands to hold and to help right now.